for today's video, I'm going to continue to vlog, but because I have reached 10,000 subscribers on my channel, thanks to you guys, I decided to make a Q&A by opening up the floor to any questions that you guys might have about anything. So I will be going over those questions in this video. I was thinking of answering the first question here, but I'm kind of tired of standing, so let's take a break. Okay, so for the first question, are you a self-taught artist or did you go to school for it? A little bit of both. I started going to college pursuing business, and that's because both my parents work in business. That's what I was used to, and I was absolutely terrified in making the risk. It just seemed like a normal thing to do. A year and a half into my business studies, I was extremely depressed. It was really boring and not fulfilling to be studying these soulless classes in business, admin, marketing, accounting. I was not happy taking those classes. So in an act of strange rebellion and going against my parents' very wise advice of keeping college as a fallback option, I decided to go to art school, and I changed my major to illustration around my sophomore year. So for a whole year, I did study art. I took classes in anatomy, drawing, color theory. The illustration classes were my favorite because we had some really good teachers there. But I only lasted a year doing that, and that's for two reasons. One, it was because I was not very challenged in my art school there. And I'm not talking about my illustration classes, the other classes like the color theory class and some other modern art classes. I did not learn anything in them, and it just felt like I was wasting my time. I'm not gonna be paying full tuition just for a couple of really good courses in art. And so I was really feeling like I was maybe wasting my time and my money trying to pursue my dream. And the other reason why I only lasted a year too was because I was having that anxiety of, well, what's gonna happen to me if I can't make art a profession? What happens if no one wants to hire me? If I can't compete fully against other artists in the market? What am I going to do? And not being able to answer that question, which, to be perfectly honest, nobody can answer that question. You don't know. There is so much uncertainty in anyone's future, especially in the art world, that I just couldn't handle that uncertainty. Other people can. Other artists are fully confident that they're going to make it work, but I wasn't confident, and I didn't want to take the risk of constantly struggling to make ends meet in the art field. So after a year of exploring this option of art, I decided to try to make a compromise. Okay, I'll make college something that will be my fallback career. It won't be art, but it'll be something less soulless as business admin. And what was my option? History. I've always been a history nerd, thanks to also my parents. So it was about my junior year in college that I learned that with a history major, you can actually do a lot of things. You can work in business, you can work in law, you can teach, you can work in organizations. It is very flexible. And so that's when I made the switch, and I had so much fun taking all kinds of history classes. I really enjoyed that time knowing that I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to find a job or not and struggle and stuff. I felt like, okay, this is my compromise. And was I right? Yeah. I've had a bunch of corporate jobs since then. But to return to the original question, I am mostly self-taught with a year's worth of art classes. But because we're talking about all that, I'll answer the next question, which is, what would you recommend to those who want to make art as a profession? And so now that you know that I've only had 1 year of art school, and I have freelanced before, I've done art full time, but very briefly. I'm one of those artists who have mostly always have had a day job on the side, so I don't really feel qualified to make any recommendations to anyone who would like to make art as their profession. I feel very uncomfortable trying to give advice as if I know what the hell I'm talking about. What I will give you is 3 little pieces of advice. Work your ass off. Work really, really hard. If you are serious about making art as a big portion of your life and career, you need to work twice as hard as a lawyer or accountant or whatever to be able to achieve that. And that's mostly as a personal development sort of thing. You need to make a lot of art and explore that and find your style. And that all just takes a really badass work ethic. So I will give you that. My second advice would be to don't niche down. Don't focus on making one thing your art thing. And that's unfortunately because the art landscape is constantly changing. Now we have AI to contend with. What you want to be as an artist, unfortunately, that's very flexible to the times, to the technologies, to the tastes, to the industries. From what I've seen, don't niche down. Try to have several skills in your toolbox. Those are my 2 pieces of advice that I feel the most comfortable dispelling. What other questions do we have? Oh, this is a good one. I feel a lot of pressure from society and my family to get a real job, not as an artist. How do you cope with that? Pressure from society and pressure from your family are 2 different things. Pressure from your family to get a real job, I would say that comes from a good place of concern. Our jobs are really risky, and somebody who cares about you doesn't want you to take risks. They want you to live a comfortable life without any added stress. Yeah, it sucks, but not something for you to be surprised or be mad about. This might be controversial. I know that there are creative people out there who are just completely shut down by family for wanting to draw or write or create anything. Really, how I cope with that pressure from family is to try to empathize and understand why it is that they even feel the need to try to dissuade you from pursuing art as a career. It makes sense. Do what you will with that. I caved to that pressure from my family by having a backup career. In a way, I kind of agree with family in being concerned about pursuing art. I might be biased. Now, if we're talking here society to get a real job, how do I cope with the pressure from society for me to get a real job? Well, to be honest, I didn't really cope with it when I was younger. I did have a bit of shame with the fact that I liked to create comics and stuff, especially from friends who kind of, I felt like, judged me for it. But I've grown up. I don't care anymore. I don't care what anyone thinks about how I've decided to live my life. It really is no one's business. And if you feel like you have a friend that is pressuring you to feel a certain type of way about you making art, I don't think they're your friend. If they don't care at all about what you create, they don't ask you or show any interest, maybe you should get a different friend. How to cope with society pressuring you to get a real job? You don't. You shouldn't care. You should do whatever you want to do. Life is too short. People who don't know you or don't care about you having any opinion about what you do with your life, they shouldn't matter. And they don't matter. If you haven't quite gotten to that point of not caring, I hope you do. I hope you find that peace, because on the other side over here, I'm having a grand old time drawing my little drawings, creating my little world, and I'm happy. She is totally passed out. What keeps you going to do day job, keep fit and healthy, and still come home and draw each night? There are few people with that sort of dedication, and it would be nice to know what makes you do that. It's kind of strange to answer this question. It's like asking, why do you breathe and eat? Why do we create art? I create art because I have to. I wouldn't be happy not doing it. It's a release. It's like therapy. For me to not create something every day, it makes me really depressed. It genuinely is what gives me purpose. Like, if I didn't have this, I don't have an answer for that. So ultimately, I think what you're asking is what keeps me coming back here after a long day at a day job where I'm tired. I feel really passionate about the importance of what I create. I'm the only one that takes it seriously. I can't rely on anyone else to do that. Basically, if I want this to turn into something, that can only happen if I show up every day. And so I've taken that realization, and that's what helps me commit every day. It's this understanding that this will only happen if I show up. As for the fit and healthy part, like, I'm not always consistent with my exercise routines, so I don't want you to think that I am like the most strict and successful at being fit and healthy. I go through periods where I'm quite active, and then other times I'm not so much. So I actually want to show you something that I recently bought because several of you have recommended that I try out an electric eraser, and that's because sometimes I get elbow pain while drawing, and I think it's because of the erasing. So over the weekend I went to Hobby Lobby and acquired this bad boy, and I waited to use it until I could show you what an electric eraser feels like. I also got the refills for it because why not? It was only $1.50. I have to put in the batteries in here. I don't know how I feel about this. It's very heavy, so it kind of hurts to hold down, and you have to hold the button down to erase. There's like a texture part that I don't like. As with anything new, it's worth giving it a try. The actual eraser is really nice. I'm not getting any smears or ghosting. It does erase like butter. What made you decide to work with an agent for your comic? This is basically the crux of what I am working towards since I was little. It's been my dream to be published, either through a novel or a comic, to have my work be distributed to a larger audience through bookstores. That's my dream. And the way to achieve that is through an agent. Do you ever publish an episode with scenes that you hate, or do you keep reworking it until you're happy with it? Hate is a strong word. I don't usually move forward with anything that I create if I hate it. So I guess the answer would be no, I don't ever publish anything that I hate. Now, do I ever publish something that I'm meh about? That I could be mildly dissatisfied or unhappy with it? Yes. And the reason for that is, one, I am my worst critic, so for me to love something that I publish is actually quite rare. I will rework something until I'm less meh about it, and that is because I understand that because I am my worst critic, it's hard for me to gauge whether this is really good to publish. But I will say that I'm at this point accepting that if it's good enough to be published, then it's good enough, and I will have to move on. This is my only way to counteract perfectionism, and that's the compromise that I've made within myself. Good enough art will get me to finish the project. If it were perfect, it would never get done. This patron also had a follow-up question to that. Do you have any advice for creators who are stuck in an endless loop of, it's not good enough, I have to rework it again? I think I just answered that, and my advice is to accept good enough. It will be your best friend, because at the end of the day, you need to really figure out what it is that you want as your goal as an artist. Do you want to make perfect art, or do you want to create art? Because those two things are not the same. I think a lot of our journeys is accepting good enough, stop reworking it, give it a few days, and come back to it. If you genuinely feel like you could rework it to give it more than a 10% improvement, then yeah, rework it. But I guarantee you, you're gonna go back to that piece of work after a few days, and you're gonna see that you're not gonna be able to improve that more than 10%. So good enough is good enough. And of course, somebody had to ask, hardest thing to draw? I'm immediately annoyed by this. Not because of the question, but just, I hate struggling to draw anything because I am so driven to try to improve. So this is just triggering. But okay, I guess I should try to answer this in a calm manner. Hardest thing to draw: horses. A weird thing that I struggle drawing: shoulders. For some reason, shoulders make no sense to me. No matter if I figure out where the collarbones are and the scapulas, that little space between the tops of the shoulders to the neck defies physics for me. Drawing any clothing with folds over that section is an anomaly. From outline to drafting to scripting, all these stages are words strung together. But how do you go from the words to the thumbnail? How do you take a still of the story in your head to create a panel that conveys all that the writing would? This is a really great question that hits to the heart of making comics. It's basically translating the words from a script into a visual image. As what is a requirement for visual artists, I'm a visual person. All the information that I take in on my day-to-day, images come to my head through that. So when someone is telling me about how their day went yesterday, whether it was funny or unfortunate, a movie is playing in my head as they're telling me. So the process of converting a script into comic panels is not that difficult because it's a muscle I'm already working. This person is also asking about how that even happens, that phenomenon of turning words into an image. If it's coming from a place of how do I get better at that, I think the only way to really improve on turning these words into images is to keep trying, gain more experience, which is why I have that little notebook to scribble down initial comic panels. You're not going to get any of these scenes right the first time. It's good to sketch out a lot of possible angles of that scene. Now, this is a process that not just comic artists do. Storyboard artists, directors for movies and shows, they do this too. They think of the scene through the script and they jot down different ways of being able to interpret the scene visually. So if you want to know how that's done, you just gotta do it in order to get the sense of how it's done. Time for a break. Why am I sitting over here? Well, it's because it's next to the books. And the next couple of questions will be regarding that. I got a bunch of questions about what artists, authors, works inspire me and which ones are my favorite. So I've condensed them into a few questions. We'll start with the most basic one. Favorite artists. My top artists have changed throughout my life because my interests have changed, so I always struggle answering this question. Like when I was really into illustration back in college, I was really into Arthur Rackham and Nell Brinkley. All of the turn of the century sort of illustrators. They influenced a lot of my work. Who else? Oh, Toulouse-Lautrec. But that was in the past. Throughout the years, it's also been Mobius, Amano Yoshitaka, and then lots of manga artists. Favorite YouTubers would be fun too. I don't actually watch a lot of art YouTube. I watch writing vlogs, I watch the news, I watch history stuff. Some of my favorite manga YouTubers are Akihito Yoshitomi's manga vlogs. I will rewatch that series, the Drawing 30 Pages in 18 Days series, many times every year. I also watch MG Comics, I watch Ink Matcha. Ariane's YouTube is great. Hello, my fellow art YouTubers. My favorite writer on YouTube is Kate Kavanaugh. I love Goblin Girl Studio for their craft videos. Those are some that I can think of at the top of my head. What fictional world would you most want to live in? I mean, Harry Potter world. I would want to go to a magical school and learn how to use magic with a wand. I would also like to know what some of your favorite comics, mangas in general are. Alright, so right off the bat, any of Clamp's work I've been hugely influenced by. And that's because Clamp was poppin' during my formative years. Cardcaptors, Magic Knight Rayearth, Chobits. That would be my dream life, to be part of a girl group of manga artists. Being part of Clamp, dream right there. Sailor Moon had a huge influence when I was little. I started drawing because of watching Sailor Moon back in 1995 in Mexico. Sailor Moon is up there in terms of like my mega top show slash manga out there. And I still have tons of merch from that era, including these coloring books. I have them all in a Tupperware of my old belongings, so I can't show you right now. But eventually I do want to share with you these coloring books. Recently, I don't read too much manga because I just don't have time. But I just finished reading as much as I could of Veil. It's still ongoing, so I'm super excited to continue to see where that story goes. It would be great if a plot were to happen, because right now it's more of a slice of life semi-romance. I'm saying semi because it's not explicit that they're a couple, but it's really, really cute, and I really hope that a plot happens. It's a great little manga that I recently read. Books you'd recommend or ones that have inspired you. Favorite authors. Recommending any book is hard because reading is such a personal experience, and what I like doesn't mean you're gonna like it, but I can provide like my top books that I would be happy to reread, and I have reread. And so I guess that would make them like the top books in my life. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. It's a really good novel. If you've seen Ghibli's movie and haven't read the book, you have got to read the book. They're both equally very good, but interpreting the messaging and all that differently. So it's hard to compare them both, is what I'm saying. Anyways, if you like the movie and you haven't read the book, read the book. It's one of my top favorite books. Another book that I've had for a long time that I do reread once in a while is Crown Duel by Sherwood Smith. It was popular back in the mid-2000s, and it would be great if it got picked up by TikTok. I have reread that duology a million times, and I own a copy. I just don't know why it's not up there. I think I lent it to a friend. An indie book that I've really liked and I'm thinking of rereading again because it was an absolute delight was House That Walked Between Worlds by Jenny Schwartz. That was such a whimsical, cozy sci-fi with a really cool concept. Yeah, it was really good. If the author ever comes out with a physical book, I will be buying it immediately. Magic Bites is another really great fantasy by the amazing duo of Ilona Andrews. That Magic Bites is the first book in the Kate Daniels series. Amazing and really good sense of humor. That's a great series. So those are my top fave books and artists that I can think of right now. To tie it to what I do, I got a question asking, I know you've talked briefly about Nausicaa and Hayao Miyazaki's influence on your comic. Are there any other notable works or artists you draw inspiration from? To tie that back to my favorite manga artists in general, Clamp is one of them, and Sailor Moon. And now if you're wondering, how can those things be something that you draw inspiration from? Well, a lot of it is the themes. The themes of Sailor Moon and Clamp many times is about friendship and kindness and having a more, generally positive outlook to life and more sensitivity or emotional. I love that. And that has definitely affected how I not only view the world, but some of the themes that I focus on my work. And so that question actually ties into, I'd love to know what inspired you to start your comic. Well, it's two things. Drawing this years ago sparked this story that eventually started being woven in my head. And in drawing that, I was also reading up on medieval French history. And when one starts reading that, inevitably you stumble on Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc's story is really crazy, unreal. Like, it's stuff of fantasy that this person existed and managed to do the things that she did in a time period that you wouldn't think she'd be able to do. So in reading about medieval French history and having drawn this drawing about this girl wearing this armor, questions had surfaced. I started answering that question with a whole new story. Not long after I created that concept, I started my YouTube channel's vlogging series. I had started that story as a novel. Through that journey of trying to write it, I realized that it would actually be more fun to make it into a comic. That was how it started, and then you can actually watch my YouTube channel's videos to see how it all developed. Okay, those were questions that you guys had about my inspirations with books and art. The bottom shelves of this bookshelf are all of my history books. This one being specifically went directly into developing Girl Night. This is probably only 25% of all the books I've read for the story. These ones I've kept because they were really good books and reference books, or I haven't finished reading them. Like this one, Magnifico, is about the Medici family. I just started reading that. This one's about Mont Saint-Michel. Saint Joan of Arc is a really good book about Joan of Arc, obviously, written by Sackville West. She is badass. One of my favorite books is strangely The Last Duel. If you recall watching the movie The Last Duel, it's actually based on this book, which is research done about a judicial duel in medieval France. And this was juicy. I do read it and talk about it in one of my vlogs. I'm just reminding you of like, this is still good. I still think about the gossip in this book. Another really good book on the Middle Ages is this one, The Ties That Bound. This was really cool to read because this historian analyzes death records and pulls data, creates like statistics about life in the Middle Ages through these death records. It's really cool, like specific accidents that happen throughout the year and who's falling in these accidents. And so you can actually extrapolate a lot about lifestyles through these types of accidents. It's really cool. The one book that actually, look at all these tabs. Speaking of something that inspired the comic, this book studies the chaos that mercenaries create in the countryside when there's war or after war. This book was really interesting to read. What happens when an army goes through the countryside? What happens to the peasants? What sort of conditions are created when that sort of clash happens? The chapter after the one I'm working on right now, I will also start depicting what I learned from this book in the comic. This book has probably the most tabs of all the books I've read because it was really interesting and useful for Girl Night. Honestly, I could keep talking about these books, but I don't think that's why you're watching this video, so I will chill on that. If you would like me to keep going and keep talking about these books on this bookshelf, like let me know. I'm not sure right now. You just got a taste. There are 3 questions that I wasn't sure where to put them, but they're about writing and character design. Let's just go over those. This one's from Patreon. My question is about the beginnings of your writing process before you get to the script. What does that look like? So I think what you mean before getting to the script, that would be the outline portion. It's the part where you're kind of putting things together into one big puzzle before you get to the part where people start talking in a dialogue. The outline phase is where you are crafting a story based on its structure or the plot. You can follow a standard plot structure with 3 acts, or you can go a little loopy and do your own thing. But generally, if you would like to make a story or a comic that is more marketable, you do want to follow a popular 3-act structure. So I'm sure you're not asking just to know what that's called. You want to know what that looks like for me. Whenever I create a new story in my head, I dump it all into a Notion. That's because I can view a Notion document on several devices, so wherever that creativity sparks, I can add to that document on the go. What's cool too is that I can add to this in a visual or by text. So if I'm getting ideas about the story, I can write them down in the Notion as a just database of different plot points that I can move around like a Kanban board, or I can add in images or vibes or aesthetics that I can pull from Pinterest and slap it on there. But basically, this is like the early stage of creating a story where you're trying to figure out what's the overall impression and the aesthetic of this creation. That is also where I start fine-tuning an outline. I write down major plot points that I think about, like, is there a heist? Is there an accident? Is there an inciting incident that is in my head? I will write that down as a Kanban board so the scenes can be moved around. This early stage in the writing is the funnest because you're just discovering this new story. Anything goes. You're not bogged down by knowing that you have to eventually make it make sense in a structure and have like actual character development and stuff. Like, this is just fun ideation. For girl night, I did make a Notion and I created its outline where I had started to write it. So if you haven't used Notion, I highly recommend it. It's super flexible, and like I said, the fact that it's so portable, like, it's really great for that flexibility. I hope that answered your question enough. If you would still like to know more about my pre-script writing process, let me know. If you're interested in a little Notion tour, I can also do that. My friends already have gotten a Notion tour through me without them asking. I'm sorry. I love Notion. Here's another question from Patreon. How will you alter your planner method to aid you in writing your book? I use Notion to write my story, and I will use my planner to keep me organized and on track. This person is asking specifically, maybe they watched one of my videos going over my planner. How I incorporate my writing in my planner is by setting goals and markers so that I can meet them. So it just keeps me accountable. Sometimes I go by word count, especially if I'm super deep in writing a story. A word count will help me consistently write every day, because that's the problem with writing. You really have to be doing it every day in order to get the story out. So I used to use NaNoWriMo in November to devote a whole month to write a story. And with NaNoWriMo, you have a minimum word count of 1,100 words. So I would use my planner to mark those goals every day for that. So now that NaNoWriMo's gone, I really need to find a different way to get me to focus on the next writing project. But essentially, that's how I use my planner. I put down daily writing goals. You can do that by time. You can put 30 minutes of writing every day and then find a way to make it fun in your planner, or you can do a word count goal of 1,000 words or 500 every day. I mean, 1,000 words is a lot. You can start lower, like 200 words a day. That could easily be like 45 minutes of writing every day. And then for our last question at this desk, this one's directly from YouTube. I wanted to ask you how you go about character designing. I always feel frozen when character designing because of all the unlimited choices I could make. I also feel nervous about how the design will naturally grow and change, even slightly, as you work on the project. There's just something daunting about that. Yeah, there is something daunting about something that you create that could still be potentially changing as you go. As the artist of something, we want to have as much control over what we create, but many times we can't really control that. Some of our characters, our stories, they take a life of their own. It can be kind of frustrating to be sitting in the back seat instead of driving the car. So I'll go through this question by sentence because it is a little bit loaded, understandably. So this person feels frozen by all the choices that they could make about a character. And you can say that about creating in general. We have technically infinite amount of choices that we could make. Why do we choose whatever it is that we choose? So the way I go about this is by always sticking to the story. Make sense in the story, and I will make the decision based on that. So for example, how to describe the appearance of a character? Well, you have to ask yourself, why is this character in your story? What is their purpose? Some example would be they're there to help the character realize something about themselves. They're there to spark something in the plot. They're there to sort of symbolize the theme in the story. There's a lot of options, but basically once you can answer that question, why is this character in this story? What is their purpose? That will guide you into making the rest of your decisions about what they look like, what they do. And that's also kind of the fun part. Once you know their role, then you can pick and choose what type of symbols or signs, what color language you want to input. That's fun too. But you do need to be able to answer why they're in your story in the first place. And that is going to help you create an interesting story. You don't want to just have things because they're cool in there. No, they have to be there for a reason. So if you feel frozen by all of the choices that you could make about a character when you're designing them, start by first asking yourself, what is their purpose in this story? That's going to help you move forward in making decisions about how to design them for the story. To address the nervousness of your characters changing while you're creating the story, I don't have too much to say on that because I too suffer this. Like, if you read chapter 1 of my medieval comic, and now that I'm working on chapter 4, they do look different. And that is pretty normal with longer comics, unfortunately. I did not want that to be the case, but I also can't control how I develop as an artist. And some of these characters do end up kind of changing how they look, where I learn a little bit more about the fashion than before, and now I have to add belts to certain things. Yeah, you just can't help it. If you can go back and update your previous pages, that's great, but characters changing, I don't know. It definitely sucks. I'm not here to say that I'm not a victim of that, so I'm in there too. It's 7 in the evening. I've been at this since 4 o'clock. 3 hours just to draw half of this panel. Do you draw for fun outside of your comic work, or does comic work take up all of your drawing time? And I've been drawing this page all day. So do you think that I'm going to decide to sit down somewhere else, open a sketchbook, and draw for fun? Do you think I have any of that inside me right now? I was going to answer this question doing something else, but actually answering it right now seems extremely appropriate. My actual sketchbooks are right here. Bought this in Spain with lots of fun sketch stuff. I've had this for about 5 years, and it's barely halfway completed. 5 years! Not to mention, I have a few other commonplace notebooks that I've doodled in whenever I have felt like drawing. But no, because I spend all day drawing this comic, it's really hard to do anything else afterwards in terms of drawing or sketching. That is also not to say that this isn't fun for me. Push aside the anxiety of creating art in general, this is fun. Another reason, apart from not having time to sketch, is the fact that I don't really feel the need to sketch. I already have a creative release in this, and so the sketchbooks don't really get much love. I do make time for art studies though, because it is important to continue to improve anatomy studies and such. This notebook I do use fairly regularly to do art studies. Once I finish it, I would like to do a flip through video, so stay tuned for that. Done. And it's 8:21. What got you into medieval history, and what made you inspired to start Girl Night? I did touch upon what inspired me to start Girl Night a little earlier in this video, reading into French history and Joan of Arc, but specifically, why am I into medieval history? I wouldn't have created Girl Night, and I wouldn't be drawing it to this day if I didn't have this severe interest in medieval history. I'm not sure I have an exact answer as to why. I think if you ask anyone why they chose to have a specific passion into a topic, there might not be as concrete of an answer as you would like. But I will say that medieval history is really cool to me because it's not so far back in history like Babylonian times or ancient times that it still feels somewhat relatable. Yes, believe it or not, I genuinely feel like it's somewhat relatable. Might not be the case for everyone, but maybe because of everything I've read, the day-to-day stuff, the anecdotes, people in the Middle Ages, they were just like us, and they were just as silly. I'm also not specifically obsessed with medieval history. I love history altogether, and so I could actually try to answer why it is that I like history. And that is the human aspect. How did these people live? What was their day-to-day like? I actually have that interest in current times. People from different cultures, I love hearing their perspective on things and how different their life is from my own. Back in high school, I wanted to be a cultural anthropologist, you guys. So I think my main interest is humans and how they live. And that's the broader explanation, but specifically the medieval history, it's it's just damn cool. I'm really happy I was able to write a story where I could weave in my interest in the day-to-day life of people, not just the outrageous political dramas that occurred amongst kings. Like, that part is cool, but I specifically would like to cover more the day-to-day stuff of the normal people. I'm happy to have been able to incorporate that in my Girl Night comic. And so this actually ties into my next question from a viewer. I'm wondering what some of the themes you're exploring in your comic and what inspired them. So I mentioned earlier that I've always loved Clamp and Sailor Moon for their themes about friendship and kindness. And so obviously that's going to take place in my own story with Girl Night. Alice's main attribute is her love for her friends and other people, and some of the lessons that other characters in the story will learn is to want to care about other people as well, to reject the cruelty life circumstances sometimes makes us more easily lean towards. And I like to deal with them in a more subtle way. I'm not gonna like smack the readers with these themes. No, it's just, it is important to understand why it is that you're writing something and what is the point of it. Yeah, we want to feature people fighting with swords, but there's gotta be a greater purpose for it.
Am I your problem? Give fire! All right.
Where does most of your viewership come from? I'm from Scotland. Most of my viewership is from America, United States, and my second viewership is from Brazil, surprisingly enough. Not sure why, but hello Brazil, and hello to Scotland. I'm curious to know, what is your process for making a YouTube video? I'm thinking of maybe starting my own comic channel. I don't really have a specific process. I've just done what I enjoy doing, and that's recording my process. I turn on the camera and I talk about what I'm doing that day, what I'm thinking, what my strategy is with that particular day to tackle the comic. My cameras, because now I have two cameras, is the Canon Mark II PowerShot. That was my first one for vlogging. A few months ago, my husband gave me this camera, the Osmo Pocket 3, mostly for walking around, being out. I love it for the stabilization. If you are considering starting your own YouTube channel for your comics, I really hope you do, because I have found that it has helped me with my projects. Talking it through, keeping me accountable by recording my progress. I find myself going to the desk sometimes because I know I have to record more than I know I have to draw, so it does help staying motivated. And of course, it's a lot of fun to record. Working on a comic must be stressful. What do you do to blow off steam when burnout approaches? It is stressful. Between feeling inadequate and being extremely aware of how long this process is going to take in order to finish a single project, it can be quite overwhelming. And on top of that, not knowing if I'm going to be able to get this published traditionally, it can be stressful at times. Some of the things that I like to do is to go camping with my husband. We do a few longer backpacking trips a year, and more often I read. I just started reading Dune as my physical book. For my Kindle that I like to read at night, with my whole contraption thing that everyone makes fun of me for, I'm currently reading Hurricane Wars. Reading is very enjoyable, and it refills the well for me in terms of feeling any burnout. I also think that if you want to write well, you should be reading. So it's a win-win for me. I get to have fun and also still work on my crafts. The other thing I like to do is to hang out with my friends. It's good to be social too. So those are my 3 things to deal with any burnout. If you're interested in seeing any of my past camping trips, I have vlogged a few. Where would you want to live if money was not an issue? I love forests. I grew up living in a forested area. It always made me feel really creative. It's a little hard to get that feeling in the city. So if money was not an issue, I would definitely live somewhere very green in France or in Japan. What makes for a perfect day if working was optional? A perfect day for me would be to have a slow morning, draw all day, and then hang out with family or friends in the evening. That's a perfect day. And to be honest, that's not too different from what I already do. On the days I don't have day job, I already do that, so I'm very lucky to have the chance to already experience my perfect day. Yeah. Do you speak Spanish? I'm just curious. I'm a viewer from Spain. Sí, sí hablo español. Mi mamá es de aquí de Los Ángeles. Sus padres son mexicanos y mi papá es de España. Él es de Málaga. Viví en México por como 8 o 7 años y he visitado España muchas veces para la familia, porque pues toda la familia de mi papá está en España. Ahí es donde me casé, afueras de Granada. Saludos a España. Nos veremos en agosto en realidad, porque vamos a ir a una boda para mi prima. How did you and your husband meet? So we actually met at a job that we both worked at. He asked me what I was going to do that weekend for chit chat, and that was the first time we had a conversation. And then I put in my 2 weeks. So the actual first time that we hung out was after that. And the rest is a lovely history. If you have any additional questions, you're welcome to leave them down below and I'll answer them in future vlogs. This was an interesting video to make, but it was fun. Thank you to all of you guys for subscribing, liking, commenting, and helping me reach 10K. I honestly never thought I'd get to this point. I'll continue to make vlogs documenting more chapters of Girl Night. If you want to follow this journey even more closely, check out my Patreon. I post all of the comic pages as I draw them on there. I also post exclusive vlogs too. I actually just posted one the other day, so you will have some exclusive vlogs on there too if you enjoy watching them. Thank you also to everyone who submitted a question. All of them were really interesting to think about and to answer. Some of these topics, we really just delved surface level on them, so let me know if you'd like me to talk more about it, including the bookshelf. That one's scary because I can go on and on about those. If you didn't submit a question and you still watch this video, I hope you found my answers interesting. If you're new to this channel and I'm a complete stranger, well, now you know a lot about me. And so for now, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!